Canada Day is cancelled. At least that's what a lot of people are calling for, and I'd like to explain why. Hello, and welcome back to Jenna Gets Creative. Please consider helping me appease the YouTube algorithm overlord by subscribing, hitting the like button, and leaving a comment. I'm a freelance illustrator, editor, and book reviewer, and also an aspiring author, and this is where I upload videos twice a week to enjoy art with whoever wants to join me, review books and art supplies, talk about current events, and collaborate with fellow artists. We're heading into an important holiday weekend for both Canada and the USA. Thursday is Canada Day, and Sunday is the 4th of July, so there are going to be millions of people adorning themselves with flags and celebrating patriotism this weekend. And there's a huge movement here in Canada for people to cancel that and wear orange in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of this continent. Frankly, indigenous communities have been calling for this and protesting patriotic holidays for decades. We just haven't been listening. But if you've been paying attention to the news at all, it shouldn't be a surprise why the world is listening this year. Canada Day has a whole lot of problems, and I've already done a video on a past Canada Day about why it's actually a day of mourning here in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, where I currently live. That'll be linked if you're curious. Today, I'm going to talk about the mistreatment and genocide of Indigenous peoples on this continent, specifically in Canada, but while some of this will be specifically how Canada chose to handle Indigenous people throughout history, the US has a lot to answer for as well, and if there are 4th of July protests too, then you should stop and take those seriously as well. I'm preparing the script for this voiceover ahead of time, so I'm honestly not sure yet what piece you're watching me create. I've been very torn about wanting to do artwork that represents Indigenous people, but also very conscious of the potential to cause harm by appropriating a culture that isn't mine. I'd like to take inspiration from the color-blocking sunset style of Coast Salish artist Roy Henry Vickers, but without incorporating the Indigenous-style animal symbols he uses, because those aren't mine, and I'll definitely be making heavy use of the color orange. Before we really get into the history lesson and commentary I want to explore today, please allow me to lay out my relationship with the Indigenous peoples of this continent, and how my family history ties into all of this, so you know exactly where I'm coming from. I grew up in the lower mainland of British Columbia with a lot of family friends and classmates in the Stolo Nation of the Coast Salish people, who were kind enough to share their heritage with me, teach me a lot of their traditions, and invite me to powwows. I feel very connected to that culture, and I wish it was mine, but I acknowledge that it isn't. My family line on my maternal great-grandfather's side has always held rumor of being mixed with Algonquin and Cree, but we are not status-carrying, and we did not preserve those cultures. The only proof I have that these family rumors are true is the fact that if you do a lot of family genealogy digging down that line, you'll find a bunch of wives with first names and absolutely no background before they became wives. That sort of thing was unfortunately common back when Europeans were colonizing this continent. The French, in particular, actually had an official stance on this. Frenchmen going to the New World would have their filles du roi, girls of the crown, wives from France, but they would also have their filles au bois, their forest girls, and this was simply an accepted part of colonial life. Gross? Yep. So yes, I grew up with a connection to Indigenous culture, but my own actual specific Indigenous heritage has been lost to my family for generations. The percentage of those bloodlines flowing in my blood now is negligible, and I acknowledge that the Indigenous culture I love is, alas, not mine. On top of that, my maternal great-great-grandfather on my grandmother's paternal side, father's side, James Keatley, was a Catholic school teacher in the colony of Upper Canada, specifically Manitoulin Island area, and he did start at an quote-unquote Indian school before moving to a general community school. Was he one of the abusive ones? Maybe, we don't know. What I can tell you for sure is the fact that he was praised by his local church and wasn't asked to leave the Indian school means he definitely wasn't fighting against the abuse. So why is Canada Day cancelled? Well, when Canada was established and Indigenous people were pushed onto reservations, The government and the Catholic Church made a lot of different horrible efforts to assimilate the indigenous people into white culture and stamp out indigenous heritage. A big part of that was the residential school system, which was a network of boarding schools run by the Catholic Church specifically for the education of indigenous children. White people would show up on the reservations, round up all the kids, and forcibly take them off to these boarding schools. While at these schools, Native children were forbidden from speaking their own languages, wearing their clothing from home, telling their cultural stories, singing and dancing their ceremonial songs and dances, etc. Punishments for any sort of disobedience were harsh, ranging from just as harsh as any school of the time to literally beating the children to death. The last of these schools closed in 1998. Yes, you heard me right. 1998, 23 years ago. This is not our deep, dark, distant past. This is in living memory. The mother of my childhood babysitter and the woman who taught me about dream catchers and how to make them has a story of escaping down the Fraser River on a raft when the school's men came to take the children from her tribe. The Indigenous communities of Canada have been calling for the Canadian government to fund excavations of residential school properties for decades, and they've always been turned down. This year, they're done waiting. The old school grounds are being searched and graveyards are turning up. On May 24th of this year, 2021, the remains of 215 Indigenous children were found at the Kamloops Indian School in British Columbia. Our government has passed a bill instituting a new national holiday, Orange Shirt Day, or the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, to be observed on September 30th. They have not, however, agreed to fund a nationwide search for all of the school graveyards. That effort is continuing without official government aid, and as I write this, the tally of remains found at school sites across Western Canada is currently sitting at 751. It's estimated that at least 6,000 Indigenous children died while attending these schools. And what about those who lived? They went through as much as 13 years of boarding school in an environment that punished practicing any form of cultural heritage and taught them that their parents and grandparents were living in the past. Many never returned to their tribes. Many who did weren't able to relearn their language or traditions and thus didn't feel like they belonged there anymore and weren't able to pass on their culture to their own children. On top of that, there was the good old 60s scoop. If you've never heard of it, that was the trend across North America of white families adopting Native children to save them, so to speak, in the 1960s. It's bad enough that these children were being adopted by families who had no interest in preserving their heritage, and likely by and large looked down upon the culture these kids came from, but for the most part, these weren't orphans. These kids were abducted from Native communities, moved far away, and adopted out in secret. And things haven't got better in the last 23 years since the last residential school was closed either. They've just changed. In 2016, over half of all Canadian children ages 0 to 14 in the foster care system were Indigenous, even though Indigenous kids are less than 8% of that age group in the general population. Do you think half of all those foster families in Canada are Indigenous? Not even close. And honestly, the only reason that percentage of kids in foster who are Indigenous, 52%, is as low as it is because of the Maritime provinces and Quebec. In Quebec, it's 17%, New Brunswick is 18%, Nova Scotia is 27%, and Prince Edward Island is suspiciously 0%. Ontario is 30%, Newfoundland and Labrador is 32%, and all other provinces and territories exceed 65%. Nunavut is 100%. Every single child 0 to 14 in foster care in Nunavut is Indigenous. Hopefully it's a fairly high percentage of Indigenous foster caregivers, considering it's pretty much only the Inuit nations who are willing to live in their ancestral homes in the Arctic Circle, but that's only a small consolation. I happen to know there's government financial aid for Indigenous caregivers who take on Indigenous children in the territories, and it incentivizes some pretty morally gray decision-making. I know of a family of 4 children of mixed Inuit heritage that have been split up after nearly a decade living in mild-weathered BC because their maternal aunt finally decided to take them home to Nunavut, but the eldest has already been legally adopted by the foster family and stayed behind. There's no good solution in that situation. The foster family was the only family the younger kids have ever known, and their eldest sibling is separated from them, but they're returning to their ancestral home to live with blood relatives who can teach them their culture. But it's to a harsh climate in an expensive place to live with poor education opportunities, and they're coming from one of the richest and mildest parts of the country. It's a mess. A mess that shouldn't have happened. Those kids should have been with their family, living with their tribe the whole time. But at the same time, it feels cruel to send them to a part of the country where life's going to be a heck of a lot harder without their eldest sibling after a decade of calling a different set of parents mom and dad. I've gone off on a tangent. Long story short, Canada committed a slow form of genocide against Indigenous people for 2 centuries. They only officially apologized for it and closed the last of the schools in my lifetime. The foster system has all but replaced the residential school system under the radar, and the government is still not funding the search for every last residential school graveyard. 751 bodies have been found, and that's only about 12% of what they expect would be found if every former campus were to be searched. This is not a time to celebrate the formation of a government that set out to eradicate the people who lived on this land before colonization. The Indigenous communities across Canada are calling for us to wear orange on July 1st and stand in solidarity with them, rather than donning red and white to celebrate Canada Day. I, for one, do not plan to celebrate Canada Day this year. Do you?